Welcome back, everyone, to a brand new episode of the Preventive Medicine Podcast. We are coming at you with many episodes now that we're in 2026. One of my goals is to be a lot more consistent with this podcast so that we can bring you great content. And today's guest is nonetheless, he's actually incredible. He's currently one of my program directors for my fellowship. We'll get into that in just a second. The idea behind this podcast and kind of what you're seeing in the title is we look at kind of practice of medicine, we kind of see these big hospital systems, but obviously private practices exist. And kind of the question that a lot of my listeners or a lot of you all might have is that like, hey, why is preventive medicine not really a bigger thing out there? Why don't people just start building these huge practices related to preventive medicine? And today's episode, we'll kind of dive into some of the realities of what that looks like in kind of having a practice that's not a big hospital system. If you listen to my last episode, and if you haven't, go do that now. That was the program chair at a big academic center. So very different than what we're doing today. But I'm excited to get into this one. This is Dr. Brad Sorosky. He is I kind of want to call him a pioneer of MSK medicine, especially from physiatry perspective or a PMR. He did his medical school at UT Southwestern, did residency and fellowship at the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, which is Northwestern. And then he has actually won the Top Doc Award in Phoenix every single year since 2009, which is crazy. One of the reasons that I came here is he's absolutely incredible at what he does. He's really good with patients, and he's currently the founder and CEO of Desert Spine and Sports Physicians. So, Dr. Brad, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Raghav. Wow. If you decide you don't want to be in medicine, I think you found another calling. An introduction and quite a delivery. I'll try to keep up.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into this. But first, our introduction. Overcoming saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths, we must now face a new enemy, ourselves. With the rates of diseases such as heart disease, stroke, diabetes, depression, and many others ballooning, we must find a better solution to these modern epidemics. Welcome to the Preventive Medicine Podcast. We believe in building a foundation of health by means of prevention so that you can build the life you want and find fulfillment with no barriers. Hear from experts around the country on how to take your health into your hands. Take control and build a foundation of health for the life that you want to live. And now, here's your host, Raghav Sharma. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you do, please don't hesitate to subscribe and like for all of our future content. All right, yeah, Dr. Brad here. You're seeing a side of me that you haven't seen yet, the podcast, social media side. So you've only seen me as the fellow so far. So how's it looking?
Oh, incredible. I wish you were as good a fellow as you are at the podcast. No, I'm kidding. You're doing a great job. No, very impressive.
Yeah, being the Preventive Medicine Podcast, obviously we'll get into all kind of the business, private practice, that kind of stuff. But being the Preventive Medicine Podcast, the first question I always ask everyone, and you probably have a great answer, is what does preventive medicine mean to you?
Yeah, I think it's trying to stay away from doctors like me, or even worse, ones that handle more serious medical conditions. So what can we do to stay away from the current medical system, which really focuses on disease rather than prevention?
Definitely. For the listeners who kind of, obviously I introduced you, but kind of what do you do on a day-to-day basis? What does it look like to be a musculoskeletal physician that does like interventional spine?
Yeah, so probably half of my practice is in clinic, in patients. And, just like you learn in medical school, you take a good history, we do a physical exam, come up with a differential diagnosis, and use imaging and other modalities, electrodiagnostics, to first get the right diagnosis. Once we have the right diagnosis, I think we're better aligned in getting a good treatment plan. And the converse is true as well. Sometimes people start to launch into treatments before we really know what's going on. I think that's a big mistake. So half of my day is spent seeing patients in that capacity. And probably 60% of my practice is spine, and 40% other peripheral, hips, knees, shoulders, foot, ankle, hand, etc. And then the other half is spent doing interventions. We do everything from joint injections to spinal cord stimulators. And we do all the pain procedures. But at Desert Spine Sports Physicians, we try to take a healthier, more holistic approach. We do not do opiates. And the underlying goal of all of this is returning people back to activities and function that they desire to be doing.
Now, that's a perfect segue there into kind of the functional part of this. A lot of times when people go to physicians, they're kind of there and they get a treatment and that's it. Physicians aren't really asking them about kind of, hey, what do you want to be doing? What kind of activities do you like? What's your function? How did you kind of come to view that and that kind of be kind of one of the guiding principles behind Desert Spine?
It's yeah. I mean, it goes way back. I think you may have had a similar background, but I actually worked a lot in college. In medical school, I wasn't able to work, but I worked actually as a personal trainer. I've always been I played a lot of sports and infatuated with the physical body and the biomechanics, etc. So I suffered a lot of injuries myself, and the frustration that goes along with not being able to do something that you really enjoy, or maybe your stress management as well. So when I was in undergrad and thinking I want to go to medical school, I bought a book of all the different medical specialties. There's not that many, I think 26. And, I read about physical medicine and rehabilitation and never heard about it. And I was like, oh, this is the field for me. It was actually on my application for medical school. And at the primary focus or tenet of physical medicine, as it sounds, and rehabilitation is returning people back to function. So residency drove that point home as well. I didn't create that, but it was something that I found very interesting.
Yeah, we are quite similar in that way. I did also quite a bit of personal training throughout undergrad, a little bit through medical school as well. And then even like you, even before medical school, I'd found out about physical medicine rehab or PMR. And that was also in my application. One of the first physicians I ever shadowed was a PMR doc. I was like, hey, this is it. I'm kind of set here. And then the other kind of similarity that we have is at some point I've been thinking private practice as kind of a future and whatnot. But obviously you've taken that leap. What pushed you to start a practice at that time when you're kind of coming out versus joining someone else like a lot of other physicians do?
Oh, well, I actually did, but joined someone else. But, I think I learned so much at the Rehab Institute of Chicago. Shirley Ryan is the new name, and had some really great mentors. Um, and, they really, I think, did a good job teaching us the clinical side of medicine. You know, like we talked about before, getting the right diagnosis and the right treatment plan. But what I didn't love, and it wasn't the physician's fault, was the bureaucratic kind of mess that I saw on a daily basis. And the other thing, and they were really good, but they also thought they were really good. And so, I think that was a limiter in further improvement. And that's something at my core I can't stand. We can always get better no matter how good we are. And so, one specific example was at the time, and I'm old, so we're talking about the very early 2000s. Musculoskeletal ultrasound was becoming very popular in the U.S., and we had a big interest, myself and some of my attendings. We were able to borrow an old ultrasound machine that was kind of out of service from the OB department. And at the time, ultrasound was actually reimbursing quite well. So we had proposed to the administrators to buy an ultrasound dedicated for MSK. I actually wrote up a pro forma. After training, I actually then got into management of gyms, et cetera. So I wrote up a pro forma. The return on investment was like under 2 months. That means the cost of the ultrasound would be paid for itself in under 2 months. Anyone in business that has an ROI proposition in front of them that pays for itself in under 2 months, it takes them about 1 second to pull the trigger there, right?
Mm-hmm.
The risk is zero. And after over a year, we still didn't have the ultrasound machine. And I thought to myself, yeah, this is not for me. I can't live in a system where something is so obvious and it can't get done because it requires 32 meetings. So, at that point, I thought I got to be in private practice and with my hand on the reins, so to speak. But sorry to go on so long, Raghava. I actually did join a practice out of fellowship. And I think that was really important because I needed to hone my skills on my own for a couple years as well. That practice taught me a lot too.
Definitely. So what was kind of the difference there? So obviously you went to what sounds like a private practice after you graduated fellowship, but then you still took the jump to do your own thing. Was it just more like bureaucratic stuff in there, or what was kind of going on? Or do I not know the full story? Tell me.
Yeah. Well, we joined a practice here in Arizona, and it was an anesthesia-based pain practice. And they were willing to hire my wife and I, and they didn't make us sign a non-compete because they thought we were kind of inferior to anesthesia pain and never actually could compete with them. And so, knowing that I kind of may want to start my own thing one day, and wanting to be in the state of Arizona, also knowing it may not be the perfect match, it gave me a jumping board into a market I wanted to be in. So and it wasn't. They did a lot of opiates. There was kind of inconsistent patient care. I think the first month I was there, one of the physicians lost his medical license and asked that I would write his opiates
Yikes.
for. There was some serious issues. We actually tried to quit after a period of time, and the CEO was a really good guy, and we ended up settling on us, Susan, myself, my wife, who's a physiatrist with the same training. We ended up opening up our own clinic, kind of under the umbrella, and then we were able to kind of practice, a more physiatric focused approach. And then when that CEO left, we ended up opening up our own practice.
Wow. That's I actually did not know that part of the story. So that's good. I'm getting a little bit of the scoop here.
There you go.
What does building a practice from scratch look like? Because, like myself, there's a lot of kind of people out there who are either in medical school, residency, even in fellowship, that don't know what it looks like and kind of want to do that. I see like Instagram posts on a daily basis about residents that are like, hey, I want to do private practice, or they write about it, blah, blah, blah. What does it actually look like to do it? Because obviously you've kind of built it from scratch over to what I think still is the largest private physiatry group that does spine and sports.
Yeah, I think we're the biggest PM&R outpatient private practice in the U.S. now. So we're real proud of that. How do you do it? One step at a time. So I had a big advantage, and that's my wife. So we had two physical medicine and rehab docs that were aligned. Our bank accounts were shared. So it's a lot of work. When we quit our old practice and then we started our new practice, we took 1 week off, and then that Monday we had the following Monday we had, I think, a half clinic Monday and Tuesday, and then Wednesday we were 100% full. So we had a huge patient following when we the first day we opened, but that also had its challenges, right? Because the operations, we had to get staff, we had to get contracts, we had to, I did all that. I did a lot of that before we quit. And I can kind of go through some of those series of steps, and we do give a lecture on that. If you're a NAS member, I don't know, all your audience, that's available for NAS members as we have a full series of how to do
Definitely. Yeah. We don't need to dive into the full 45-minute lecture. And I know you texted that to me, so I'll take a look at that. I still haven't yet, but is there a quick 2-minute summary of kind of the biggest things that you need to do? Obviously, if not, then that's fine.
No. I think, 2 minutes over. Yeah, I mean, first, there's some legal things you have to do. You have to get are you going to be an S Corp, a C Corp, or an LLC? Most people are going to do an LLC. You want to get staff that you can actually lease staff from, and I recommend that. They'll take care of all the benefits, background checks, etc. And you're still hiring and firing them, but it kind of do the management. I think they're called, I can't remember the abbreviation, but and then after that, the insurances. If you're going to take insurance, you have to be credentialed, your contract with Medicare first, and then the other companies, and then you maybe an electronic medical record system and a place to practice.
The steps keep rolling.
Systems, it keeps going, and there's information out there, man. I bet you ChatGPT, if you asked them how to do it, they would run through the steps. So it's doable. It's just a lot of work, and if you have a partner, I've seen some other doctors that have a buddy from residency. I think that can be helpful because two is better than one.
Definitely. And now a lot of private practices do fail. I don't have the statistics on the top of my head, or I probably should have made a note of it, but a lot of them fail. A lot of them go under. Usually by the 3 to 5 year mark is what I'd say, if that's consistent with what we think. What are the biggest reasons that they fail?
Probably not tracking the money. So the most important thing is providing good care. You have to have patience. And I think Warren Buffett said it takes a lifetime, to build a reputation. It can take 15 minutes to lose it. So you want to think about that as you progress through your career. But, be a good physician first, 100% the most important thing. But then the thing is these insurance companies, it's a very complicated process, and you have to know how to code and how to bill and how to track the money as it goes through the system. We evaluate practices all the time currently that are struggling, that kind of want to wrap up underneath our kind of management system because we're good at that. And we see it's amazing. People have no idea what their allowable is, what their contracts are, and where the money is going.
Got it.
Yeah, just because you did the service doesn't mean you're going to get paid for it. So you got to make sure.
Definitely. Do you think that the number one thing is like, even if you're practicing good medicine, you're taking good care of patients, that practice can still fail, or is it all just like good doctors, good intentions, but they just suck at business?
Yeah, I think that, and I think, you know, back in the day when overhead was lower and you were getting paid a higher clip for services delivered, you had to suck at business to fail. Now I think you need to be good at business to survive. Makes sense. It's just, I think the margins are a little bit lower than they were back then. And, that's just, the insurance companies are really difficult. Yeah.
So I guess as a natural follow up to that, if there is, let's say, a resident or whoever else that's thinking, hey, I want to start something of my own, and it sounds like they need to have some sort of business knowledge or background, and a lot of physicians don't, are there kind of steps that you would say that they should start taking if that's something, or is that kind of like, hey, don't worry about this, just join someone else for now because it's too tough?
Yeah, I would, I think I can answer that either way, but no, I mean, I think if that's something you really want to do, and you graduate school, that shows that you're pretty hardworking. If you still have some gas in the tank, I think it can still be done. I think you need to know yourself well, and you need to have some common sense, but you don't need an MBA. Have be inquisitive and look things up and all that. I mean, the internet and AI, it's all out there. Everything to do exists. I think are going to be easier than others. If you go to a rural area, so one of the things I think, and your audience is a lot of young doctors, Rogoff, is
Fair
that
amount of young doctors and a lot of people that are just generally interested in health.
okay? Yeah, so I'm sorry to get a little bit away from the health topic, but I think all the information's there. If you go to a rural area, the insurance companies will give you better contracts. What does that mean? So like you could do the same service and then you could get paid vastly different if you're in a desirable area versus if you go to a more rural area. And if you're in those rural areas, your overhead's gonna be lower. You're gonna get paid more. It's gonna be an easier business to run.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that was actually a pretty decent kind of segue to this next portion as far as kind of why preventive systems don't really work that much. But before we get there, you've kind of mentioned the difficulty of getting paid. And a lot of people who are interested in health, we all seek care at some point. And we don't really know what the difference is between kind of what happens between when we see the doctor for a 15, 20-minute, 30-minute visit, whatever it is, and receiving the bill. And obviously, as a practice owner and medicine, part of that is you navigating and kind of dealing with insurance companies and kind of what the back end is. So even not related to preventive medicine directly, but all of us seek care. So kind of what does that back look like? What does dealing with these companies look like?
Well, let's talk about the flow. So, a patient comes into the office and they check in. The first thing you have to make sure that you may need a referral if they have an HMO. Second, you look at their insurance card and you have to call and make sure they're still paying their premiums and that it's active. Then you can see the patient, and then you see the patient. Then you have to put in the correct codes. Then that gets submitted to something called a clearinghouse, where they scrub it and see if there's any errors. And they also scrub it for any patient identifiers so that it's HIPAA compliant. And then from the clearinghouse, it gets split out into the primary insurance, secondary insurance, is their auto insurance. And then the money comes back into the clearinghouse and then it gets inserted into your bank. And so you need some sort of process to track all that to make sure it happens. It behooves the insurance companies to not pay, right? They make more money. So, and if anything breaks down in any of those steps, you're not getting paid, and therefore the lights go out.
Definitely. Yeah. So there's a lot that goes on in the background that a lot of people don't really understand when it comes to
Yeah.
healthcare. And that kind of translates a little bit towards kind of preventive medicine as a practice model. So obviously we have the healthcare landscape, as you all listeners heard in our intro, and here every single time we have obesity, diabetes, all these things kind of ballooning. So we're like, hey, why are we not working more on preventive medicine? Why don't we have clinics that are just focused on kind of lifestyle medicine and preventive medicine, because those are specialties? Why don't those succeed, or why don't we see them popping up everywhere?
And the insurance companies don't pay for it. It's crazy. I actually don't think you can get paid for obesity as a diagnosis. You have to code the comorbidities that go along with it: hypertension, heart disease, peripheral vascular disease, etc. But the thing that causes all of it, you can't really treat. Now there may be some changes to that, but it's disgusting, really frustrating for a lot of us as physicians that would love to focus more on that, but the healthcare system doesn't pay for it. So that's where these concierge docs And here in Arizona, you have naturopathic doctors, which have, in my opinion, limited training, but they're in a cash model, and so then they can spend a lot more time with their patients, and talk about preventative, and sometimes it makes them look good and more here frustrated because we would love to, but under the insurance model, it doesn't work. And another point that people don't always understand is if someone has insurance, you can't charge them cash for some of these services. You can if it's uncovered, but like I can't say, hey, we're talking about preventative today, so I'm going to charge you cash for that. I think you would get in trouble.
So it sounds like there's just kind of systemic barriers to even getting
That's
paid,
right.
because that sounds crazy to me. You can't get paid for a diagnosis of obesity, which is certainly a qualified medical diagnosis to make. Is
Yeah.
that something that insurance, like you might not know the answer for this, but is that something that just came up with, like, hey, we're not going to pay for this?
I think it's all about limiting their costs, right? So I mean, they're they're heavy business people, so obviously they have to provide care for a heart attack, but anything that they don't need to provide care for, I think they're going to try to get away with.
Definitely. So obviously, we try to do what's best for the patient at kind of all times. That's definitely what I've experienced at Desert Spine. Patient always comes first, no matter what. And when preventive medicine, that would be great if we were able to do that. And obviously, I think I try to provide as much counseling as I can in the limited time that I have with patients. Sometimes within whatever busy schedule that we have, but sometimes some of those things do conflict as far as being paid for a diagnosis like obesity versus doing an intervention that's going to pay. Is there ever a time where kind of that kind of conundrum has come up in your mind or in the process of kind of Desert Spine that kind of has been a little bit of split?
Yeah, that's a good question. I hope not. One of my mentors was really good at driving home the point. If you're ever confused on how to treat a patient, just think about someone you really care about, or think and think about what would you recommend for them. And I think that's a really good guiding light for all of us. Probably in all aspects of life, but especially true in medicine. So, that's really and there still is enough money in this broken system that beats up physicians quite a bit to make a good living. If you run an efficient practice, and you track all the things that we talked about, you can still do quite well without having to compromise your ethics, morals, or duty as a physician.
Yeah, I think we've had pretty similar mentorship or some great mentors, because one of my mentors is the exact same, where he always had his patients. He was like, hey, this is what I would do for you if you were my parent or if you were my sibling. And I think that is a great guiding light in medicine to kind of go by when those situations do come up.
Yeah, the other question I have for you, Ragav, though,
Ooh,
is
we're flipping the script.
yeah. Well, unfortunately, what percentage of the population would pay for a preventative medicine consultation? So we're all busy, we all live our own lives, and I think it takes a special person to kind of to kind of get ahead of things until it's broken. I don't do a lot with my car until it's broken, right? I mean, I guess I do bring it in for my 5,000, 10,000 checkup, but I think a lot of people probably don't. So I think it's a two-way street to some degree too.
That's a very, very valid point. It's something I've actually been thinking about and kind of talking about, putting some posts up about as far as like things like public health goes. Because typically in the U.S. healthcare system, until something gets broken, why pay for it? And there's not really an incentive to do so because healthcare is so expensive. So who's going to come in there and pay $300 for, hey, you should go exercise and eat some more fruits and veggies and manage your stress? That's not really something anyone wants to pay for. So that's where I think a lot of the onus is on public health, which I don't think we do a great job of in this country. And for those who are listening to this who want to dive into kind of an episode on incentives of the various players in healthcare, I have an episode on that, I think 2 or 3 episodes ago. So kind of dive into that as far as a lot. So there's a lot in that episode. But as we're starting to wrap up this episode, Dr. Brad, the kind of biggest things are health. And as you mentioned, preventive medicine, coming back to it. If someone asks you how to get healthy, and by the way, you look amazing for being at your age, so people should definitely take advice from Dr. Brad here. What do you tell them in 2 minutes if you're just catching them in the elevator?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on two of them. I think exercise is the key. I can't think of any diagnosis that exercise is bad for, and so that's a mix of cardiovascular and weight training. I think nutrition is really important. I don't love everything with the current administration, but I did just watch the press conference for making America healthy again, and this idea that we should be eating more real food and getting away from processed foods. I think we do have data on that's really, really important. And then sleep. After that, I think stress management. Those are kind of the four stress management. I would say socialization is part of that as well. It really worries me how isolated, some parts of the society is getting. And the other thing is which doctors sometimes get bashed for, but I'm not sure it's valid, is the mind and the body are related. And so, if the mind is unhealthy, the body becomes unhealthy as well. So yeah, again, that's exercise, nutrition, sleep, anxiety, stress management, and part of that's make sure you get out there and have a good time with your friends.
I promise you all listeners, I did not give him a script, because those are pretty much the exact 5 pillars that we talk about all the time in this podcast. So we are pretty much aligned on that. All right. And because this is a business podcast to some extent, and we talked a little bit more about business and kind of private practice, if a young physician wants to start a practice, what honest advice would you give them?
I think if they have tolerance for some risk and they want to work really, really hard, they go for it, because I think the reward, everything in life, part of your work, the bigger reward they will be, and I think that's still true today.
Those are great words of wisdom. Dr. Brad, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I hope our listeners got something valuable out of this. There will be some show notes down below as far as Desert Spine to kind of learn a little bit about what the practice does if you're in the Arizona area. And once again, thank you, Dr. Brad.
Thank you, Rob. I have a feeling you're going to be on TV one day, or a radio. You're very talented, and I enjoyed it. Thanks for Rob.
We'll see if that happens.